When FIFA writes its history, the spotlight shines on Pelé, Maradona, Messi. But in the shadows lie stories of African kings, men who changed the game, who lifted entire nations, but whose names fade in silence. Why? Why are these legends missing from football's grand story? Today we bring them back, the forgotten kings of African football. Africa's relationship with football is unlike anywhere else. In Europe, it was business. In South America, it was artistry. But in Africa, it was survival. It was resistance. It was unity. From the colonial era, when the game spread through missionary schools and mining towns, football quickly became Africa's language of freedom. To dribble past a defender was to dribble past oppression. To score a goal was to declare, "We exist, we matter." And yet, even as Africa produced magic on the pitch, global recognition lagged behind. Still, legends emerged. Kings who shaped their countries, inspired generations, and gave us unforgettable moments. Let's begin with Laurent Pokou of Ivory Coast. In 1970, he set an AFCON record, scoring 5 goals in a single match against Ethiopia and 8 in the tournament. His finishing was ruthless, his flair unmatched. Yet unlike Europe's golden strikers, his story rarely makes the FIFA documentaries. Then the magician, Segun Odegbami of Nigeria, nicknamed Mathematical. A winger with precision so sharp, it felt like geometry in motion. In 1980, in front of 100,000 roaring fans in Lagos, Odegbami scored twice to give Nigeria their first ever African Cup of Nations. It was more than a trophy. It was national rebirth. From Cameroon, we cannot forget Roger Milla. While the world remembers him for Italia '90, they often forget his journey before then. At 38 years old, when most footballers retire, he stunned the world, scoring goals, dancing at the corner flag, and dragging Cameroon into the quarterfinals. He showed that African football was not just raw talent. It was endurance. It was joy. It was showmanship. In Zambia, tragedy struck in 1993 when a plane crash wiped out the national team. Only one man was spared, Kalusha Bwalya, who missed the flight due to club duty. Broken, grieving, he carried his nation alone, rebuilt a team of unknowns, and reached the 1994 AFCON final. His story is one of football's purest examples of resilience. And then, Rashidi Yekini of Nigeria, a towering striker with a left foot like thunder. At the 1994 World Cup, he scored Nigeria's first ever World Cup goal. His celebration, gripping the net, eyes filled with tears, became an image of African pride. Yet Yekini died in poverty, forgotten by the same system that once celebrated him. And of course, George Weah of Liberia, the only African ever to win the Ballon d'Or. He wasn't just a footballer, he was a symbol of hope for a country torn by war. Long before he became president of Liberia, he showed the world that Africa could produce not just good players, but the best. But every one of these kings fought uphill battles. African players were dismissed as too raw, too physical, not tactical enough. Clubs in Europe often signed them but benched them. Stadiums back home were underfunded. Political leaders interfered in selections. Wars tore nations apart, sometimes forcing teams to play under threat of violence. Laurent Pokou was punished politically in Ivory Coast. Roger Milla had to beg to return for the 1990 World Cup, only to become a global sensation. Rashidi Yekini faced depression and loneliness after football abandoned him. And George Weah, despite his Ballon d'Or, was mocked as a political footballer rather than celebrated as a pioneer. But still, they played because football was bigger than them. It was about their people. Picture this, Yaoundé 1972, the African Cup of Nations semi-final. Laurent Pokou faces the mighty Zaire. He scores twice. The crowd erupts, Ivory Coast roars. Though they lose the final, Pokou becomes Africa's top scorer, feared across the continent. Fast forward to 1990, Cameroon versus Colombia, World Cup knockout stage. Roger Milla, 38 years old, dances past René Higuita and scores. The entire world gasps. Africa has arrived. Cameroon becomes the first African nation to reach a World Cup quarterfinal. Or Nigeria, 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. The Super Eagles shocked the world, beating Brazil in the semifinal, then Argentina in the final to win Olympic gold. Names like J.J. Okocha, Nwankwo Kanu, and Daniel Amokachi light up the stage. For once, Africa wasn't just competing, Africa was conquering.
These stories aren't in FIFA's glossy highlight reels. They are buried. But in every dusty street where a child kicks a ball of rags, the spirit of these kings lives on. Laurent Pokou showed Africa could produce world-class strikers. Odegbami gave Nigeria its first taste of continental glory. Milla made the world dance with him. Rashidi Yekini gave us a celebration that still breaks hearts. Kalusha Bwalya taught us that grief can become greatness. And Weah? He proved that Africa could reach the very peak of world football. These men were not just footballers. They were warriors, dreamers, survivors. They were kings. So when you hear the story of football, don't just remember Pelé, Maradona, or Messi. Remember Africa's forgotten kings, because their legacy is written not in FIFA's books, but in the hearts of millions. You're watching Sports Space 4, stories that inspire Africa. Please subscribe for more African football stories.